President Buhari to hold emergency meeting with security chief today.
Military troops dislodge terrorists at Abuja in Niger State.
President Buhari expresses full support for redesign of Nigerian notes by the Central Bank.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall review President Muhammadu Buhari's visit to South Korea.
President Muhammadu Buhari was in South Korea for about 6 days last week, where he participated in the first World Bio Summit 2022, which was jointly organized by the government of the Republic of Korea and the World Health Organization, WHO.
The first World Bio Summit deliberated on the theme, the future of vaccine and biohealth. The summit attracted health experts, heads of international organizations, and leaders of top biopharmaceutical firms. Nigeria was selected alongside 5 other African countries, which have been chosen by the WHO and the European Union as global training hubs for bio-manufacture of vaccines on the African continent.
Now, at the summit in South Korea, President Buhari presented a statement seeking ways to foster more effective partnerships that impact positively on the life and safety of Nigerians, stressing that Nigeria is ready to become the global hub for vaccine production and distribution. That's a good sign. A good thing, Kingsley, don't you think?
Well, that's right. Now, while it was basically a health summit on vaccine production, it was also an opportunity for President Buhari to hold bilateral discussions with his South Korean counterpart, Yoon Sung-yeol, at the presidential palace in Seoul on the sidelines of the first World Bio Summit. Now, during the bilateral talks, President Buhari expressed his desire for enhanced defense and security cooperation with Korea.
While commenting on the piracy in the Gulf of Guinea to which Korean ships had fallen victim, President Buhari noted that the level of attacks had decreased considerably over the last 1 year due to the provision of equipment to the Nigerian Navy and Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, by the Nigerian government, while also commending the Korean government for the supply of a vessel to the Navy.
Well, the Nigerian president equally expressed Nigeria's desire to widen the scope of trade relations with Korea beyond gas exports, just as he also called for expansion from the long-term gas contract to other areas.
Both leaders also discussed the need for cooperation at the multilateral level, particularly at the United Nations, with South Korea indicating interest to vie for a seat on the Security Council in 2024 and seeking Nigeria's support. The issue of peace on the Korean Peninsula, demilitarization and denuclearization of the region also featured in the bilateral talks, Kingsley.
That's right. In other engagements on the sidelines in Seoul, President Buhari took time to meet with top Korean business executives whom he enjoined to increase their investments in Nigeria, pledging that his administration would continue to make efforts to improve the enabling domestic environment for businesses to flourish.
So what are the benefits and low-hanging fruits from the president's visit to South Korea? We have assembled a panel of guests who will speak on the issues on Good Morning Nigeria today. I am John Joseph. Welcome you to the first episode of the program for the week.
And I'm Kingsley Osanolo. I join my colleague Juma to also welcome you to the program. We are live, as always, at the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority and broadcasting from our headquarters studios here in the nation's capital, Abuja. In the course of the program, we'll have our complimentary segments, and these include municipal review and business. Comfort Amodu is here with us to give us the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Comfort.
Good morning, Kingsley and Jimmy. Here's the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari will on Monday meet with security chiefs in the nation's capital, Abuja, to further review and strengthen security network in the country. The president, who was initially scheduled to commission the new National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure, the semi-technology, an innovation complex, will receive briefs from the security chiefs and interject on areas that need more attention. The commissioning of Nasani new complex will hold on a later date. To security, troops have reportedly repelled terrorist attacks on 221 Battalion Wawa Cantonment, New Busa, Bongo local government area of Niger State. The failed mission of the terrorists was attributed to combined swift response of military and men of 401 Air Combat Training Group, New Busa. Though as at the time of filing this report, there was no official statement from the military to this effect. And troops also repelled and dislodged terrorist attack after failed attempts on the military base early hours of today. The Nigerian police force has described as false reports that the Federal Capital Territory was being saturated with bombs. A statement by the Force Public Relations Officer Olumoyiwa at Dejabi warns against spreading falsehood as the Federal Capital Territory is safe and there's no imminent threat, neither is the FCT being saturated with bombs as speculated. The Public Relations Officer therefore urges residents of the FCT and Nigerians at large to disregard this fake news purportedly sponsored to heat up the polity. The governors of the Southeast region have agreed to set up a joint patrol in all major highways in the zone, especially during the Christmas season. The governors met in Enugu in view of rising state of insecurity in the Southeast. Other matters affecting the zone were also discussed in the meeting.
Southeast governors therefore call on the federal government to come to the aid of the people of Southeast in beefing up security in the zone. Meanwhile, we all agreed definitely and totally to start a joint security patrol in all our major highways in Southeast, and this will commence before December 1st. So we're going to put funds together to purchase vehicles to ensure that we have 24 hours joint patrol of security people in most of our highways.
President Muhammadu Buhari says he is fully in support of the decision by the Central Bank of Nigeria to redesign and launch new Naira notes, stating that the nation will gain a lot from the policy decision. Speaking exclusively to Tambari Television in Hausa, President Buhari described as convincing reasons given by the CBN that the economy stands to benefit from reduction in inflation, currency, counterfeiting and the excess cash in circulation. He said he did not consider the period of 3 months for the change to the new Naira notes as being short. The president emphasized that only people with illicit money buried under the soil will have a challenge with this, but workers, businesses with legitimate incomes will face no difficulties at all. President Muhammadu Buhari Sunday evening granted audience to Emir of Katsina, Alhaji Abdul Muminu Kabir Usman, after hospital discharge. The president prayed for his continued good health and strength to continue with the good works he is doing in his domain. He thanked the Emir for his steadfast support for the present administration and his relentless advocacy for the well-being of the less privileged. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has advised those aspiring to occupy public offices to understand that such a quest requires serious commitment because many lives and livelihoods could be impacted by their reactions or inactions. Vice President Osinbajo gave the advice when he received a delegation of Southern Kaduna leaders, specifically from Kachia and Kagoro local government areas of Kaduna State. The Vice President said the commitment to the country does not allow careless dealing with matters that concern the poor and those who look up to government with expectations for solutions to their problems. Now, the Nigerian Correctional Service has dismissed 9 officers and retired 25 others for various offences against standard practices. A statement by the Public Relations Officer, Nigerian Correctional Service, Umar Abubakar, indicates that 4 of others were issued letters of plain warning, and the statement adds that this is in line with the powers of the Controller General of Corrections as contained in the Nigerian Correctional Service Act 2019. The Corrections Boss assures the public that the service will not relent in ridding its workforce of bad eggs. That's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Jumai and Kinsley after this commercial break. Please do not go away.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Next on the program is Business News with Comfort Ahamadu.
Uncertainty builds around the carbon market in Africa following climate change challenges and global warming. Towards enhancing market innovative solutions to climate change and global net zero emissions targets, African leaders are collaborating to expedite the emergence and growth of the market in the continent. This follows the formation of an international steering committee for the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative. A statement by Laolu Akonde, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media Publicity, Office of the Vice President, indicates that Vice President Yemi Osinbajo is a member of the recently formed International Steering Committee for Africa Carbon Markets Initiative, which Nigeria hopes to pioneer the domestic production of carbon credits for increased job creation. In other news, reactions have continued to trail the move by the Central Bank of Nigeria to redesign 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes. However, economic analysts are optimistic that the initiative could control inflation.
If we are talking about inflation, the good side about it is it's not going to curtail inflation in the short run. But in the long run, it's going to.
I think the same way you need to do more in terms of checkmating money laundering activities, because now those with illicit funds will be looking for channels and means to now deposit those monies in bank.
The new currency will be in circulation from 15 December 2022, while the existing currency will cease to be legal tender from January 21st, 2023.
All right, that was the business news package. Up next is Municipal Review.
Yes, we have some papers this morning to review, and I'll begin with the Punch newspaper, quite a busy front page there. I will begin above the masthead. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Students fundraise ransom, kidnapped mates released. Students fundraise ransom, kidnapped mates released with riders. Buhari meets security chiefs, postpone event. Soldiers kill terrorists in Kaduna. Terror bombings, Somalia to fly critically injured victims abroad. Death toll now 104. Countries condemn attacks. Buhari, Pope, others mourn 161 soul stampede victims. You find details on page 2, 4, 5 and 14. Just below the masthead, we have CBN destroys over 60 trillion banknotes under Buhari. 6 trillion banknotes under Buhari. With riders, Apex Bank spends 3.88 billion to dispose mutilated banknotes in 5 years. Naira slumps to $785 as reserves dip. Local currency faces more pressure. Buhari defends Emefiele as criticism mounts against Naira redesigned. And the picture story you see there, NSCDC bust Abuja illegal fuel dump operators, recovers trucks. All earnings crashed by 288 billion in third quarter, it's 5G. The Law Housewife pauses Chief Imam, says I hate marriage. Senate probes AGF Malami's ministry over 2.2 billion expenditure. Chris Lee.
Okay, let's also look at the window page of the Leadership newspaper. Leadership newspaper, above the name flag, you have the following headlines. 2023, Afenifere backtracks, endorses Tinubu. 60 killed in Indian bridge collapse. That figure has actually risen now. It's now nearly around about 78 persons who died in that incident in western Indian state of Gujarat. Oshibajo, ex-Colombian president, and AFD Business African Development Bank lead new job creation effort. And that is the lead story there, because they also have a front page comment. But it says President Buhari shocks finance minister, backs Emefiele on Naira redesign. Those are the headlines from the front page of the Leadership newspaper. And very quickly, Juma, I know that there are a number of interesting stories to deal with. Some of them we don't have on the front page, others are running copies. The result of the Brazilian presidential election has been announced. Yesterday, Brazilians, of course, went to the polls again for a runoff between the incumbent and the former president, Lula da Silva, and the result that has emerged is that Lula da Silva has won the presidential election, scoring 50.9% in the runoff, which means that, of course, his challenger couldn't be anywhere near him. Of course, Lula da Silva is 77 years old. He had previously been president of Brazil from 2003 to 2010, and he staged a comeback. He's a leftist, where the incumbent, who is now outgoing president, on the far right. So you can see the isolation between the right and the left in terms of the leadership of Brazil. He was a unionist, a metal worker. And he brought a lot of reforms, but at the same time, he was also accused of taking a bribe from a construction firm, and he was jailed. He spent about 580 days in jail until that conviction was quashed, and so he couldn't participate while he was in jail in the 2018 elections, but he only now had the opportunity in the latest round. So Brazilians have chosen a new president, and congratulations to them. But it was a weekend of bloodbath, at least from the east. If you take a look at the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west. Somalia, 2 bomb blasts, the capital Mogadishu, at least 100 persons dead. Among them, women who were carrying babies, and hundreds of others were injured. So Somalia, the never-ending violence continues. And then the story I read from the front page of the Leadership newspaper, a bridge collapsed it's what we call a suspension bridge. An old bridge. It was rehabilitated some time ago, but there was a crash, and then persons just tumbled into the river. At least 78 persons died. And then in South Korea, the Halloween festival, crush of young persons, stampede, and what about 160 or so? 61 young persons and still counting perished in that particular incident. And the president, of course, visited the scene of that disaster. If you look at these numbers, there are hundreds of persons who just died over the weekend. Somalia 100, India at least 78, South Korea 160 something. These are persons who suddenly are no longer here on earth with us. So it's a big shame that these incidents happened. Our hearts go out to their families, and May the dead have repose for their souls. Now, the other story, of course, is what we read, that Lagos Ibadan Expressway, Juma, and that has to do with students who are fundraising. There is a kidnap incident. This is a big name. That's the former Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Ibadan. That's Professor Adibu Agbaje. Professor Adibu Agbaje studied political science. He has been a guest on Good Morning Nigeria sometime in the past. We took him from our Ibadan Network Center. Professor Adibu Agbaje, at some point also in the early 80s, in the very early days of The Guardian, he was a political correspondent for The Guardian newspaper. He was the first to have made a first class in political science at the University of Ibadan. And for many years, that record was unbroken. Well, he was on sabbatical, and he's still on sabbatical at Abuja, and he was returning to Ibadan, where he was accosted by his kidnappers right on the expressway. The kidnappers, according to the report, took out one policeman, injured several others.
They knew he was coming.
And now they are asking for a ransom of 50 million. I think that is, of course, an assignment for the security agencies. We can't say more than that, so as not to jeopardize ongoing efforts. But it's a high-profile individual. It's just an academic. Anyway, what does he have? If of course, he was part of ASU, that's to say that if his salaries had been referred for the period that ASU was on strike. So where is he going to get the money to pay? I'm sure perhaps they didn't quite know who exactly, but it's a brain, it's a talent, and we just hope that all will be well, and that all will be well that ends well. That's right. Juman. Well, the story of the Emefiele and the Minister of Finance and President Muhammadu Buhari. Well, last week, Central Bank announced that they were going to redesign the 200, 500, or 1,000 notes. They will become available from the 15th of December. Well, I've already expressed my views on that. We had a conversation on the subject matter also on Friday on Good Morning Nigeria. Now, the Honorable Minister of Finance appeared before the Senate, and of course, she also expressed her own personal views regarding that. And then the Central Bank replied, issued a rejoinder to the Director of Communications, and then yesterday, President Muhammadu Buhari said, look, he's in support of the redesign of the Naira note. So I think these are matters that are ongoing, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, we had a conversation about the state of all depots in Nigeria, and just, I think over the weekend, the civil defense bust Abuja illegal fuel dump operation. That means fuel has been coming to Abuja, it has been diverted to illegal dumps, and that's why people are still queuing and suffering just to get fuel and wasting man-hour, on the queue itself. It's a very, very sad situation. And we talked about depression some time back. The new housewife poses cheap man says, I hate marriage. This is her second marriage, actually.
Yes. I'm sorry, we'll come to that because that's a very important story.
Yes.
The story concerning the illegal fuel depots that are being operated, or fuel dumps, or whatever they call it. Kudos to the civil defense for busting these criminal elements, because the people just think that you can hoard a product to cause economic hardship. It's an offense under our laws. And product diversion is also an offense under our laws. So the next thing we want to hear is the diligent prosecution of these persons. We don't need, first of all, we don't need to take all the fuel there to go to court. Of course, there will be confiscation of the quantity that have been found there. Let the authority, that's what part of what DPRO is now. That is the midstream and downstream petroleum regulatory authority. Take whatever is there, take them to filling stations. And the unfortunate thing is that you don't find officials of the authority on regular rounds, because there are filling stations that have fuel, but they won't be selling, they won't be disposing from only one pump, and then you see the queues waiting for 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers away. You waste man hours just trying to get fuel, and then at the end of the day, they are profiteering, they are selling to those in jerry cans and so on and so forth. Now back to that human interest story. Give us the details.
No, they said she killed the husband. This is the second marriage. The first marriage, she said she doesn't want a man to come close to her. She doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want marriage. Then she was forced to marry this man again, and luckily the first one escaped. This one died. She killed him. She poisoned him.
It's a very touching story.
It is.
A very touching story. Where again, earlier you and I think off camera, we were talking about old age and how to deal with old age and some of the accompanying ailments. Look, Nigeria, I think that we are gradually beginning to get more exposure into mental health issues.
Yes, mental health issues.
Mental health issues. It's not everybody you see walking on the street that is it's correct, as we say. It's not everybody who is driving, who you see driving. That is a sane human being. I say, okay, I'm sorry. But say, okay, come and jump me now. Now he will just cross your legs because he doesn't know what he's doing.
No.
So the same way, why would your parents or your guardians or your family force you into a marriage? You say you don't want to be in the company of any man. There are persons who are like that. Yeah. Some of them, it could just be emotional issues. What it requires is not to say, take any drastic measure against her. Get her into a rehabilitation program.
I she had a baby. People still don't understand postnatal issues, People give birth, they go into depression, how to handle children. Look, it is something we need to look into. When you do a continuing conversation to find ways. The Ministry of Women Affairs should look into this issue and find ways of having at least a clinic in the hospital if they don't want to go to the psychiatric hospital for treatment. A clinic in our hospitals to treat this kind of diseases. Because the disease, it's a cancer that eats deep without you even knowing that you are depressed in the first place until it gets out of hand.
I'm sure. Look, we don't have to really a Monday morning. From what we are discussing, I'm sure we know there were instances where some women put to bed on account of this as a postnatal there's something postpartum something. And something like they just kill off the babies.
Yes,
they just kill the babies. But that's why every human being requires attention. Particularly for mental health issues. It is not time to just say this one is a madman, it's a craze, and so on and so forth. That is why psychiatry is a specialized field in medicine. And there are ways of dealing with this. There are also clinical psychologists who will come. But it's a sad thing that this has happened, and we hope that other families will learn from it.
Yes. I hope that the people handling the case will put it into consideration that she needs treatment and maybe give her a lesser sentence or at least whatever.
It's not about we need treatment in the first instance because no normal human being will do that. Now, while we are still talking about issues, I don't our producer and director have said it, but this is occurred to me. In the case of the floods that have happened, we're talking about specialized fields. People are in IDP camps and so on and so forth. Do we have social workers who are attending to them in their temporary locations? All right.
That's $1 million question.
That's our newspaper review for this morning. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll get ahead our principal item for discussion. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, before we commence our conversation, this is a review of President Buhari's visit to South Korea. Let's take this background report by Oyemi Ajayi, our correspondent.
It was the first time President Muhammadu Buhari will be visiting South Korea, though the purpose was to participate in the first World Bio Summit 2022, which was jointly organized by the government of the Republic of Korea and the World Health Organization, with the theme, The Future of Vaccine and Biohealth. The summit is a gathering of health experts, heads of international organizations, and leaders of top biopharmaceutical firms. Nigeria was selected with 5 other African countries by WHO and the European Union during the last EU-Africa Summit in Brussels, Belgium in February this year, for mRNA technology transfer and global training hub for biomanufacturing of vaccines on the African continent. On the sideline of the event, President Muhammadu Buhari met with President Yoon Suk-yeol of the Republic of Korea as he sought other ways of more effective partnerships that will impact positively on the lives and safety of Nigerians and the expansion of the Nigeria-South Korea trade relations, aside meeting with South African investors, especially Daewoo Company, where a memorandum of understanding was signed towards the rehabilitation of Kaduna Refinery, termed a quick fix project. The president said he looks forward to the delivery of ongoing projects, especially at the Warri and Kaduna refineries and the NLMG Train 7. He also met with Nigerians in South Korea, reminding them that they are Nigerian ambassadors in the foreign land, where he enjoined African ambassadors to continue to give preference to the protection of the interests of the African continent and her people. Now, what are the expected fruits of the president's outing in South Korea? Guests already seated in the studio will give their perspectives shortly.
And we have seated here in the Abuja studio the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Sadio Henry. It's a pleasure to have you join us once again.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome. And also joining us via Zoom from Lagos is the Director General of Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, Bashir Jamo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jumai, and good morning, Nigerians.
And also via Zoom from Seoul in South Korea, we are being joined by Anis Rabiu. He is the president of Nigerian Students Association. We understand the distance is about 8 hours, so it is well past 3 p.m. right now.
Right, so in South Korea, what is happening on the heels of COVID-19. How did the summit go?
Well, the summit went very well. For a summit that is the first, and also a theme that is new. The outcome was good, and we were satisfied with it.
You're satisfied with it. What is the takeaways from the summit itself, and what benefit will Nigerians get from it?
Well, first of all, let us look at why the summit came up. It was the result of the general review of the global response to COVID-19. Did the whole world do it right after this pandemic struck? No. Many countries were on their own, and each country doing what it thought was right. Whereas the virus itself was spreading around across borders without regard for nations or without regard for economic status. So the WHO, World Health Organization, reviewed and said, no, there should be a global response, a better coordination when you have a disease that threatens the whole of mankind, and we should begin to consider what we should be doing together. And WHO and the government of South Korea worked together and agreed to set up a summit of that nature and find new ways, discuss new ways of responding to global challenges.
Okay, great. Thank you for your opening comment. Let's now join the DG NIMASA, who joined us via Zoom. If you can hear me. Okay, can you tell us the thrust of the president's bilateral engagement with the South Korean leader as it relates with fighting piracy and policing the Gulf of Guinea? Because we know that the summit is not all about biodiversity, and all that, but we also talked about bilateral relations between Nigeria and South Korea, including security aspect. Tell us a little bit on what happened there and how we were received. If you can hear me, please unmute your audio so that we can hear you well. We can't hear you.
please unmute your audio.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go on.
Okay, thank you very much, Jumai. If you can recollect, our territorial waters, sometimes in 2020, we continued to experience a number of attacks of vessels to the level of average one per day. And by the time Mr. President decided to cancel the skilled anchorage area contract manned by the private company, he mandated the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency and the Nigerian Navy to take up the issue of this insecurity in our own territorial waters. It was at that level we launched the Deep Blue project to complement what the Nigerian Navy has been doing in terms of providing security in our own territorial waters. The South Korea continued to experience number of casualties in terms of such attacks and kidnappings. But we thank God with the advance of SPOMO Act, that's Operations of Piracy and Other Maritime Related Offenses Act, signed by Mr. President in 2019, with the deployment of the Deep Blue project assets, with the complementing the Nigerian Navy, with the additional effort put by the Nigerian Navy. By the third quarter of 2021, we continue to see the decline, and from the third quarter to date, we never experienced any attack in our own territorial waters. And what centered in the discussions between Nigerian president and the Korean president was how to ensure that we man our own territorial waters and ensure the safety of our own territorial waters as well. And having over a year now without single attack, we stand a better chance to see the increase in cooperation between Nigeria and South Korea. In doing so, Jumai, the global maritime trade was dominated by the Western countries. Now that we're experiencing a kind of decline in terms of our oil revenue, it's time for us now to shift our own focus to the maritime business. South Korea is number one top-notch in terms of shipbuilding and ship repairs industry. At the sideline talk, as well as meetings we had, we agreed that Nigeria will have to revive the shipbuilding industry, the ship repair industry, the infrastructure of our own shipping industry, as well as enhancing our own fishing activities in our own territorial waters. Before now, fishing used to be second largest that provides income to the Nigerian economy. Unfortunately, because of insecurity and other vices in our own territorial waters, we continue to see the decline of our fishing trawlers as well as the fishing industry. Now, all these things has been discussed. We are now looking forward to see the Korean officials to come and inspect some of the decayed facilities we have and see how we can join hands to revive such such areas and make sure that we go back to the basics in terms of fishing, where we have over 200 species of our fish, 14 species of reptiles, 72 species of water-associated birds, 59 species of amphibians, and more. So with all this, and with the cooperations of the Korean in terms of technology, we are best to have a new dawn in our own maritime industry so that we can now be competing with the Western dominated countries in this global trade. And our economy will now continue to flourish. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Bashir Jama. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. I want to come back to the studios and take on the Honorable Minister of Health one more time. Dr. Samuel, tell us some more about the conclusions of the summit. Because the more we've heard about, it's been around vaccine production. I imagine that there are other issues around vaccine. It could be manufacturing, it could be with distribution, it could be with cost, it could be with trials of vaccines in general. So what were the conclusions of the summit with regard to some of these sub-themes I've touched on?
Well, in the first place, South Korea was, as the host, was, you could say, representative of the high-income countries and the upper middle-income countries. And then Nigeria was representative of low-income countries and lower middle-income countries. There are just two heads of state there. And so it appears just the two representing the two sides. We know that at the peak of the COVID-19, when the vaccines were discovered, efficacious vaccines, the lower and lower middle income countries were in a difficult situation that they received no vaccines. And beyond vaccines, therapeutics, diagnostics, and even prevention and response commodities, like even gowns, gloves, and so on. So the idea at this time was that this was not a good way of going about a pandemic that went around the whole world without caring for the boundaries. So the outcome was that should we in future, if we face a certain situation, similar situation, rely only on just one part of the world producing all these things while the others wait and expect to be served, or should there be a different response? So the outcome is that there should be multiple areas of manufacturing, particularly vaccines, which is the most difficult. At the same time also was one that stuck out most obviously during that response. But it extends to other commodities, other consumables too. We got the first set of our personal protective equipment that came from Jack Ma. That was a Chinese philanthropist. And later on relied on West African Health Organization, the African Union. Every country was more or less on its own. So the idea now is there should be multiple production sites and multiple distribution and logistics centers. And Nigeria will be one of those that will be considered. The WHO has already earmarked about 5-6 countries in Africa who will be able to use the new mRNA vaccine technology to be able to produce vaccines, not only now against COVID-19, but any future outbreak. So you can have multiple sites where logistics will be better organized and coordinated, and production will be, of course, at the very base in order to have a better global response.
So what you're saying is this summit itself will change the narrative for Africa?
It should, and not only for Africa, but there's some Asian countries and South America, because South America was also involved. They were, well, my use the word shortchanged, but we didn't have as much as those who were actually producing, who decided they would take care of themselves and their families. And, well, understandable in a way, but that is not the best way to respond when you have a global threat. And as the president said in his own speech, had the predictions of certain experts about Africa come true, you will have had actually a real threat to survival of certain countries and certain nations. So happily those predictions didn't come through. And we should in future be able to do it better, differently, if you have a pandemic of this nature.
How does the outcome of the summit square with our own domestic efforts at ramping up vaccine production through the initiatives of the government and BioNTech, I believe, and one or two other agencies? So how do you square that?
Yes. Even before COVID-19 broke out, this administration here had already started to put emphasis on certain amount of self-sufficiency. Grow what you eat and wear what you make. So the idea at that time was to return to vaccine production capacity, and we're already in discussion. We had in fact already concluded discussions with a private company to form Biovaccines Nigeria Limited to produce routine vaccines. That agreement is going on, and they have received a certain percentage of the needs of Nigeria to produce, working with a technical partner. Now, with the outbreak of COVID-19, another urgency followed it, and that urgency required that the capacity to manufacture be extended beyond routine vaccines into the new vaccines, modern vaccines. And looking at the entire picture, WHO now selected those 6 African countries to be the spokes for production of vaccines based on mRNA technology. And Nigeria is one of those ones. And the joint venture company we have, Biovaccines Nigeria Limited, is representing us there. There is a training going on already of technical personnel in South Korea. South Korea hosting the training on using the mRNA technology. So we are working on producing both vaccines, both for routine immunization and for mRNA-based technology for new vaccines.
Will there be an opportunity for people, who came out during COVID-19, alternative medicine practitioners who said they found a cure for COVID and they were registered? Is there a room for them to improve on what they have?
Well, yes, science is always a work in progress. You don't really end. And there are people who came and say, yes, they have the cure. Well, good. So show us the cure. We need to prove that it works. We need to prove that it's safe. That you don't cure one problem and create another. So those things have to be done with research and development and clinical trials to make sure that these things are actually usable. That process goes on all the time. It's NAFDAC and NIPRID and NIBA are working on looking at all the possibilities for cure and response that have been brought forward.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you very much. We'll return to you in the studios. Just to indicate that we are being joined now also here in the studios by Dr. Adoyi Omale of the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy at Base University here in the nation's capital. Dr. Omale, we're glad to have you on the program.
Good morning.
Okay. Earlier we introduced Engineer Anis Rabiu, who is the president of the Nigerian Students Association in South Korea. You can see him there on the right side of your screen. Dr. Rabiu, of course, we know that you are still with us via Zoom. You just give us a minute. I want to return to Dr. Bashir Jamal, who is the DG of NIMASA, for him to explain some more of what he was telling us about the outcome of the president's engagement with the South Korean authorities with regard to the maritime issue. So I'm going back now to Dr. Bashir Jamal. Dr. Bashir Jamal, you touched on a number of issues. You touched on maritime safety, touched on maritime security and the contributions that they have made. And then you also talked about fishing and the trawlers, as well as dockyard maintenance and all that. Where these other agencies that normally will be concerned with these activities, were they also in South Korea as part of it? Shippers Council, for instance, and then those, of course, who are in charge of Niger Dock and other facilities that are used for ship building or boat building and construction and maintenance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kingsley. We are going to have an expanded, talks with the South Korea again. Basically, what we discussed was in relations to blue economy. The different sectors of the economy do have their own contributions towards enhancing the blue economy. Now, you cannot discuss the blue economy without the issue of safety, without the issue of security, without the issue of fleet expansion. Now, when you talk about the maritime security, I have already explained to you the successes we recorded in the last 1 year. On the issue of safety, we have seen the conclusion of Global Maritime Distress System, GMDSS, which used to address the issues of distressed vessels and ensure safety in our own territorial waters. We have also secured approval for nationwide removal of wrecks in our own territorial waters to ensure safety navigations. And then on the issue of fleet expansion, we are about to commence the disbursement of the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund, which is CVFF. Now, when you look at the first and the second, that's the safety and security, those are our own internal issues. The South Korea contributed towards ensuring secured our own secured waters by donating a vessel to us, and they have seen the successes recorded in that area. And before now, they have been very a little bit worried and disturbed to be able to invest in Nigeria because of this insecurity. So the presence of NIMASA is to explain and prove the success recorded towards the issues of safety and security. Having established that, now the next thing is to ensure that issue of technology, issue of shipbuilding, issue of ship repairs, with regards to the blue economy, is being discussed, and let us see what the South Korea can invest in Nigeria. Kingsley, as you are aware, today South Korea is #1 in terms of shipbuilding. Now we have over 853 kilometers of coastal waters, over 8,000 kilometers of inland waterways. We are now conducting a research to see and understand the types of vessels we need for our own coastal waters as well as inland waterways. Now, Korea is one of the best countries that we have to approach in terms of investment, in terms of assembling these ships, in terms of technology transfer, so that Nigeria can benefit from the expertise knowledge of the South Korean companies. Now, in so doing, we discuss with Samsung, with Industries, we discuss with Hyundai, and they promise to send their technical expert to come back to Nigeria and look at those areas. Now, in so doing, other sectors like Shippers Council, Nigerian port authorities will have to come together and bring what we will have as a conglomerate requirement for the maritime industry, and we will be able to develop and sustain the issue of blue economy. So this visit is in stages. The president has already established the platform by discussing this at the top level with the president of South Korea, and we have discussed with the leaders of Samsung and Hyundai industry. After their inspection, we will now have to sit down here in Nigeria with all other stakeholders to discuss which way forward and what can we do so that we can have a robust and accurate requirement for the maritime industry to flourish. Thank you very much, Kingsley.
I'm going to stay with you briefly. The maritime trade contributes 1.6% and then 3.5% to the GDP, and the president has, emphatically talked about security on our waterways. So what are the plans to continue to fight piracy and the economic benefits that comes to Nigeria? Don't you think that the maritime sector can contribute more to the GDP of this country if the waterways are safe from piracy?
Yes, July, as I mentioned earlier, we have already recorded a very successful milestone. Most of the Western countries that have been coming to Nigeria to see what we put in place in the last 1 year and achieve what we achieved that has never been achieved in the last 27 years. The record we have, if you check statistically, since 1994, we have never recorded success in terms of maritime safety and security in our own territorial waters. Now, what remains now is sustainability, to sustain this tempo. Now, we have number of reasons that accounted for this insecurity. So what the Nigerian Maritime Administration is doing is a non-kinetic. The Nigerian Navy, they deal with the kinetic operations, while the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency deals with the non-kinetic. What we are doing in such non-kinetic operations is to look at the basic reason why this insecurity continues to flourish. Even though the government will continue to invest heavily in procuring platforms, training of manpower to ensure that the security is being maintained. We are trying our best to train our young youth because of lack of unemployment. Last year, we sent 200 young Nigerians to Philippines, Greece, India, and UK to study maritime related courses, including maritime safety and security. This year, any moment from now, we are sending 235. You see, we are now picking these children out of the street to the classroom so that they can learn basic things and become useful to themselves and to the society. These are part of the strategies we are putting in place to ensure that we sustain the tempo on the issue of maritime security. As you said, Jumai, certainly if we can secure our own territorial waters, make very good use of our fleet expansion program in terms of CBFF, definitely there is going to be a serious increase in terms of GDP. Countries like Poland, China, European Union, as well as Singapore, most of them develop their economies using maritime trade. They don't rely on natural resources. So definitely, now that we are seeing dwindling oil revenue, the next target is for us to improve on our own maritime sector. With that, we will be able to, the figures you are mentioning is just a mere charade, but the time we develop our maritime sector very well. So I assure you, Jumai, next year around this time, even if I'm not here, someone else will be telling you different stories, and the National Bureau of Statistics will continue to give you an increased figure in terms of contributions of maritime to the GDP. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Jamal, thank you very much there for the insights you have provided into the linkages that are likely to grow from the president's engagement with the Korean authorities on aspects of the blue economy. Now, let's go over to Engineer Anis Rabiu, who is still with us via Zoom. Engineer Rabiu, the president had an interaction with Nigerians who are resident in South Korea, and of course one of the messages that he delivered at the meeting was to remind Nigerians resident there that they are ambassadors of this country. If you were at that meeting, how did it go?
Yeah, good morning Nigerians, good morning Nigerians, good afternoon from South Korea. At the meeting, we the Nigerian community, also which includes the Nigerian Students Association, we met the president at in South Korea before their departure to Nigeria after the first BIO summit in Seoul, South Korea. And at the meeting, the president encouraged the Nigerians, generally the Nigerian community, to be a good ambassador of the country, and we should try as much as possible to try to learn more skills. In terms, we should try to learn more skills, most especially the students, where he encourage us to be very versatile in our learning, most especially the ones who are actually into postgraduate studies, to be more versatile with our learning, so that we can actually have a kind of a knowledge transfer program back into Nigeria. Many of us have been away from Nigeria for so many years to actually acquire one or two skills, and he talked to us and also encouraged us that most of these skills we are actually learning in South Korea. We should try and see how we can replicate this knowledge in Nigeria to actually improve our society. Also, at the meeting, the president also told us that we should be a good ambassador of the country in South Korea. And so far, for the last 5 years, there hasn't been any criminal cases of Nigerians in South Korea. So Nigerians have always been well behaved in South Korea. And also, most importantly, the student association are also doing so well in trying to represent the Nigerian community in South Korea in terms of their research development, and also in the area of community service in terms of publication. Nigerian has been doing so wonderfully well in terms of their academic activities, and also the Nigerians we have in the business area, they're also doing exceptionally well to actually represent Nigeria well in terms of their businesses. Also, the president also encouraged Nigerians, for some of our colleagues who are also graduates who have actually finished one of their courses and they are presently still in South Korea, maybe working. The president encourage them to return back to Nigeria, because there has been a series of opportunities back home whereby they can actually start up a business or a big kind of a company which can actually help the economic growth of the nation, so that all the technology we're actually having back here in South Korea will not just be learn the knowledge here in South Korea, and most of this knowledge we're also giving it back to South Korea. We should see whether we can give back to our nation, our country, our dear country, Nigeria, and see how we can use this to actually improve the economy of our dear nation. Also, in terms of the knowledge and skill transfer, the representative who actually come with the president also encouraged us to actually see ways whereby we can give to Nigerian society as we are still present here in South Korea. And some of those things, we told them that the Nigerian students here in South Korea, we are actually doing so many things to actually give back to our society back in Nigeria too. We do some mentoring programs whereby we reach out to young Nigerians youth in Nigeria, whereby we teach them some technology that we have here and is not available there in Nigeria. And also, we have some scholarship opportunity program where we do some mentoring in terms of how to get scholarship in South Korea, and some scholarship opportunities that are available here in South Korea. We see a way whereby we communicate those programs, those scholarship opportunities back to our youth in Nigeria. So we believe it's a kind of an interesting forum where we can discuss with the president, and also share his plight with us. And he's a very interesting and very funny man. We also feel at home having a short meeting with the president. So it was a nice experience speaking with the president here in South Korea.
It was a nice experience, and one question I need to ask you is, did the president's speech give you hope as students in South Korea, and did you in any way itemize the areas which he mentioned and how you can contribute to the growth of the country when you return?
Yeah, thank you so much. The president sincerely gave us a sense of hope about Nigeria and the future of Nigeria, and also reiterated it to all that the youth, we are the future of this country, and we see how we can work together as one Nigerian and see how we can improve our dear country. He talked about the area of agriculture, because there at the meeting we have some of our colleagues who are experts in terms of IT security, and we have some who are also experts in drone technology. The president actually talked to them, and they said they should come with initiative on how they can use the knowledge and the skills they've actually acquired in South Korea to apply to our situation back home in Nigeria. Also, we have some of our colleagues who are also in smart farm technology and some in disaster management. For example, the issue of floods we have presently in Nigeria. Some of our colleagues, they are very experts in this area. So the president actually talked to us and make a kind of a suggestions to us that they should come up with a model on how they can use all this technology that we actually use to impact positively here in South Korea, to see how they can actually apply this knowledge into South Korea, into Nigeria's situation, where we can alleviate some of the problem, and there won't be kind of spending all the money of Nigeria into a foreign land, whereby most of the if we have indigenous companies which are actually owned by Nigerians, we can actually have a kind of a circular economy whereby most of our problems are actually being solved by our indigenous engineers, our indigenous expertise, whereby we can have a kind of a stable economy. So the president sincerely gave us a kind of a sense of hope, a message of hope, whereby there are a lot of opportunities back home in Nigeria. Though recently there is a kind of a kind of a brain drain transfer which is actually happening in some part of the country, whereby most of our guys are actually living to Nigeria. But the president told us that we should never lose hope in this area, and also told us that it's very good we have people who actually leave the country, whereby they go out to actually learn skills and knowledge, whereby those skills are actually not available here in Nigeria, or maybe they're not actually there back home. So if we can actually go outside the country, learn those skills, knowledge, maybe at a particular point in time, we should try as much as possible to be patriotic to the country. So the patriotism of individual actually is what is going to actually bring many of us together, to actually come together and see how we can impact our community, our society back home, and see how we can move the country for better.
All right, Anis, thank you very much there for the comments that you have made and responses, of course, to the questions that my colleague and I have asked. Your backdrop there probably is a greenhouse, I imagine.
It's a smart farm.
My colleague is suggesting it probably is a smart farm. And we know that you are pursuing your doctorate in agricultural engineering. By the way, tell us, what is the size of the Nigerian student population in South Korea?
Okay, actually, presently we have a kind of a rough figure of about 350 students in South Korea, but I believe we have more than that, because there has been some series of scholarship opportunities which are actually available in South Korea. But for some of us that were able to gather ourselves and form a larger association, we have about 350 students in South Korea, but there are still some students who recently come into the country that we are still trying to see how we can get access to their data, and we see how we can integrate them into the student body. So this is, but for now, I can say we have an estimated population of 350 from our data, but I believe we are more than that, sir.
All right, Anis, thank you very much. And you earlier indicated that in the 5 years or so, probably that you've been there, no Nigerian has been caught up on the wrong side of the law. So you are good guys and good girls. We hope that you all continue to be on the right side of the law, and that's the way to go. So the president has reiterated the fact that you have to continue to be good ambassadors. Anis, we'll come back to you near the end of the conversation one more time. But let's return to our studios. And just before I pop my first question to Dr. Adoye Omale of the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy at Bayes University, I just want to remind our viewers that earlier on, my colleague and I, Jumai, in the course of the newspaper review, we were talking about some of the persons who were kidnapped at the Ibadan end of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, including Professor Adigun Agbaje, who is the former Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics of University of Ibadan, and others. Now, I've just got a message, at least 2 or 3 messages, that there are some positive developments with regard to that. Details, of course, we'll get to know much later. Now, back to Dr. Omale. Dr. Omale, well, the president's visit to South Korea seemed to have been 2-in-1, attending the summit and also pay an official visit, as it were, to South Korea. Does this spell a new dawn for Nigerian-Korean relations?
Yeah, good morning. Let me use this opportunity to join the president to sympathize with the victims of the stampede in South Korea. I want to say that the move by our president visiting Korea and attending the summit was a very, very strategic move. Korea, as you know, is the 4th largest economy in Asia and the 10th largest economy in the world. So as part of our economic diplomacy, it was good that the president is reaching out to countries like Korea. As you heard from what the Minister of Health has said, and Dr. Jamo, the head of NIMASA, there are lots of opportunity that we can benefit with our strategic engagement with countries like South Korea. South Korea has become one of the most industrialized countries of the world. They have used sheer use of information technology. They have been able to build their industrial base, and as you heard from what they have said, we can benefit even beyond area of vaccine production, beyond area of maritime security. Their power sector is one of the best that you can get, and we have challenges of power. They've been able to set up their industrial base, not just agriculture, so we can benefit from all this, and that is why in economic diplomacy we said that it is very strategic to enter into strategic partnership with areas that we can derive benefits of this nature. The minister talked about training. Yes, we have a lot to benefit from training. I know that Korea did a lot of training for us, especially the amnesty program in the Niger Delta, and it was very strategic. Like the minister said, only 2 heads of states were in the summit, and I think it is strategic because once you heal whatever problem we are having in Nigeria, you have dealt with almost half of Africa, and I think it was deliberate that Nigeria was included in this summit. Like he said, the developing countries or the less developed countries, Nigeria is one of the leading countries, especially in the south. And going into this summit is very strategic, especially in the areas of this vaccine production. We know that large number of our population has still not been able to take this COVID vaccine because there's still a lot of hesitancy. And recently I traveled and I could see that many people who were going, they had to go and queue to take the vaccine because they were forced. Without it, you could not travel out. So we need to learn a lot from South Korea, and I think this partnership is very, very good, and Mr. President has adequately projected this relationship. He had a one-on-one discussion with the South Korean president, and I think this type of partnership should be sustained, not just only with South Korea, but with other similar industrialized nations that are coming up. And countries like Indonesia, so countries like Malaysia, and so on, we should continue to sustain this relation, because this technology transfer we are talking about, it's not just with the countries of the West. We can actually learn a lot from other countries that are industrialized. Like in our Gulf of Guinea, I was very happy that they donated ships and some other equipment to support Nigeria. So we can collaborate with them, especially in the Blue Sea project that they talked about. And oil theft has been one of in the last 1 to 2 months, that has been one of the serious issues that we have been facing in this country. And we can leverage on this relationship with Korea to be able to tackle those menaces, because it's affecting our whole economy. Oil still remains largely our major foreign exchange earner. And how are they able to do it to this coastline? We don't get the results, or we don't benefit from the knowledge that they have acquired. So these are some of the things that I think since Mr. President has made it and has discussed at the highest level at the summit and in the sidelines of the summit, in terms of implementation, we should begin to be more proactive so that as the trainees come back, we should be able to feed them into the system so that we can get maximum benefit from the trainings that they have undergone.
While the president was there, he made a case for Nigeria as an investment-friendly and choice destination for people who want to come and invest in Nigeria. Security is key to all these things that is being discussed at the summit. This is not the first summit that issues like this have come up. And do you think that the Korean government, while they assist us in security matters, will in any way feel that they need to really look into our security apparatus to ensure that if they bring investment into this country, it will be well protected? What is the economic, the volume of trade that we'll be getting from South Korea if we have an agreement that security will work and will protect their personal and business in Nigeria?
So, what I would say that Nigeria is a naturally fertile ground for any investor, and any serious thinking business concern will want to come and invest in Nigeria. And actually, they are coming, despite even the security challenge. Yes, there are security challenges. The Chinese are here; they are everywhere. The Americans are here, even the Europeans, they are all here. So Nigeria is a very fertile ground for business because of the nature of our economy. We have the raw materials, we have the manpower, we have so many things that is going for us. Yes, security has been a major challenge, but notwithstanding the security issues, I think many countries of the world want to do business with us, and I think with this visit of Mr. President, it will give a lot of assurance to investors who want to come and set up their industries here. I know that Daewoo has been active here. Hyundai and some other countries, their heavy industries have been very active in Nigeria, and I think that this visit will further give them the impetus to come into our economy, to come and invest. We talked about the smart farms and so on. Up till now, I still wonder why our agricultural sector has not been able to transform beyond this subsistence level of the more we learn from countries like South Korea to be able to begin to establish these smart farms, to begin to establish this mechanized agricultural system, to have an all-year farming system. Look at water is flooding is affecting everybody. We have not been able to harness this thing, dam the water, and use them even in dry season, and then to have all year round farming. It is very important that we should be able to revolutionize the agricultural sector. And I think with countries like South Korea, we can learn a lot, especially in building dams and building hydropower facilities and so on.
All right, Dr. Mole, thank you very much. It's interesting that South Korea became the economic powerhouse that it is today, even when South Korea has been in the state of war since the 1950s versus the Democratic Republic of Korea. That's to say, North Korea versus South Korea. They are still technically in a state of war. So it's an interesting
making things work for them.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the key challenges that we have to sort out. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I want to return to Anis Rabiu, who is still with us via Zoom from Seoul, the capital of South Korea. Anis, share with us your experience in South Korea in terms of some of the missing links in our agricultural practices, if not policy. I tell you something. I mean, Dr. Omale here was saying, look, how do we have year-round farming? How do we harness our natural endowments, water, and so on and so forth? But my key concern has to do with, for instance, assuming you've studied anything around the history of agriculture in South Korea, what is it that we are missing in seeking to transform our machete and hoe farming? Every time you see back-breaking labor on the farmland, and the output is pretty limited, it's pretty small, post-harvest losses and so on and so forth. What is it that we are not getting right, that if we got it right, the entire circuit will be complete and then we'll be top flyers?
Thank you so much, sir. I'll start by saying electricity didn't get better by the continuous improvement of candle. So what this actually means is that there's a kind of a new innovation which actually makes the transformation from a light candle to give us the kind of an electric light. So actually, basically, what we have in Nigeria is we still have the we still operate the crude farming system in Nigeria, which is actually different from what the Korean farmers are actually doing. For example, here in South Korea, there's the challenges of winter. During the winter, the temperature goes down as low as -15, sometimes -20, -25, which is very difficult for any crop to actually thrive during this season. And what the Korean government with institutions, companies, and the farmers actually comes about is about creating a kind of a greenhouse system. And this greenhouse system is actually being improved over the years, like year in, year out. For example, as you see on my screen, we have a smart farm system, which is basically kind of a greenhouse system, which actually operates on a net zero, which we're more or less like there's no electricity from the grid. So what actually we're actually lacking from our home hand in Nigeria is the basic technology, which we are not actually input into our agricultural system. Another thing I see we actually lack in Nigeria is the availability of machines and tools, locally made machines and tools, which has actually been one of the major challenges for us to actually develop our agricultural system. And now, everywhere in the world now, the agricultural system is actually transforming from the mechanization into artificial intelligence farming and smart farms and the likes. And mostly here in South Korea, most of our farmers, mostly now we are entering winter. Most of the greenhouses, most of the crops we are actually growing is in-house farming, whereby the in-house technology is being totally employed into this system. Recently, some Nigerian researchers, mostly some students in my laboratory, in conjunction with some other researchers in renewable energy technology, we are actually looking for a way to see, since we have the greenhouse technology here in Korea working well for us, because the major challenges of Korean is eating during the winter season, whereby the temperature go low as -20, -25. Whereas in Nigeria, we don't have such challenge. The major challenge we have is we have more or less like a summer, where we have a higher temperature, and cooling it won't be as challenging as eating this temperature to what we actually have here in South Korea. So we're actually looking for a way to see how we can have a model design of a greenhouse, and see if we can have all this design actually being located in all the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria. And we are also seeing how we can apply a kind of a renewable energy technology, whereby at any location in the 6 geopolitical zone, when we are having a kind of a model of this greenhouse design, the renewable energy technology and the energy demand and every other necessary things which actually involves the energy part, because we know we have issues and challenges of electricity in Nigeria. So we're actually seeing how we can have that incorporated into it, so that we have a kind of a robust system which will actually suit the Nigerian system. That's for smart farming. So also on our agricultural system, another thing I see that is actually lacking in our agricultural system, which the Korean have actually gone far away, is a kind of a synergy between the farmer, the research institute, the companies, the actual companies. There's no synergy in this in Nigeria, but here in Korea, most of our research is industrial-based research, which we're actually doing here, whereby the problem they're actually facing back in the farms or in the companies, they actually send it back to us as student researchers to actually work on it, or maybe some existing system to actually improve on those things. So the result we actually get, we actually be what we actually be recommended in our meeting or subsequent dialogues with the company to actually improve their system. So I feel that is not actually happening in our own situation in Nigeria. There's no a strong synergy between our institutions and our farmers. There's no strong synergy whereby the research output are actually being applied to solve our immediate problem. So I believe if the government, the President Muhammad Buhari actually have a very good initiative on this agriculture, but I believe if all the other state governors and the ministers, they actually work in hand with this goals, the objectives of the Mr. President, I believe we can actually go far. we can actually go far in the aspect of including technology into agriculture, because most of the countries around the world, they are actually gone far beyond the normal whole and knife farming. For example, I have an example of Netherlands. Netherlands, in terms of mass land, is about 4,000 estimated mass land is about 45,000 square kilometer, and which is more or less smaller than Borno State, smaller than Nigeria State, and some other few states in Nigeria. And Netherlands has one of the best agricultural outputs around the world. I think after USA, they are second. So this is actually telling us that agriculture has actually moved from the raw way, the way we actually used to do it in the older ways, than the present days. So we actually need to invest heavily in research and technology to actually transform this agricultural system from the old ways of doing things to the modern technology of doing farming. So that's my take on that.
Okay, I'm still going to stay with you a bit. Can you tell us what you as a student are working on right now? And you know, a lot of people japa out of the country. I hope you won't japa, stay there. You will bring back whatever you've learned and the technology back to this country so that it can contribute to the growth of the country economically. What do you think?
Okay, thanks so much for that. Anis Rabi, I'm a PhD student in Agricultural Control Lab, and basically we deal with control environment, smart farms. And in our lab, we're actually working on how we can have renewable energy technology to actually fit into greenhouse system. The purpose of this is actually to reduce the energy demand, because the energy demand generally is about 50% of the production cost, which is very high in South Korea. And we are actually working on seeing how we can have a technology whereby we can reduce renewable energy technology, whereby we can reduce this amount of energy input in our greenhouse, and we can farm, and the cost of farm output will be cheaper for farmers to sell to the consumer. And basically, my PhD work is basically on renewable energy materials, greenhouse energy materials, which I'm actually working on. So there are different kinds of renewable energy materials, energy saving materials here in greenhouse, whereby without eating, we can use this technology to actually reduce the energy input in the greenhouse. So this is what I'm working on for my PhD research. Also, we also have a section which actually involves the renewable energy technology, whereby we actually have the renewable energy technology input, whereby we have some renewable energy technology which were actually being applied to reduce the energy demand of greenhouse, because cultivating in a greenhouse system actually requires energy in terms of heating, cooling. The oxygen is also needed, and some other things are actually needed to actually produce optimum growth of plants. So all this technology, we actually see how we can scale down the energy consumption, so that energy demand can actually be reduced, and so that we can actually save costs. And aside the screen materials, we have the technology of renewable energy technology, whereby we have the underground heating system, whereby we are seeing how we can incorporate this into the greenhouse. And presently, our lab, in conjunction with agency company, we've been able to develop a greenhouse model, which is actually working on a total renewable energy system. And also, there is another institution we're actually working on, the Korean Renewable Energy Institute. Three of us were actually working on this new model of greenhouse, whereby it's operating on a full system of renewable energy technology. So by this, I believe, if this is actually, we are actually at the first stage of testing stage, and we have completely test this output of this greenhouse system after its construction. So I believe after this research, we can actually recommend this to investors or farmers who intend to scale up their farming system into the latest technology, and from this it's going to be adopted. So if this is actually being introduced into Nigerian system, I believe our agricultural system will also be improved from the hoe and knives cultivating method being used to over the years. So I believe we can apply all this technology, greenhouse system, advanced machinery, robotics, IoT, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and all this.
Anis, thank you. Before we get into robotics in our farming, let's just scale up from the machete and hoes to mechanized. Earlier you talked about equipment and machinery, and I think that's important, so that we don't leapfrog and then begin to have challenges. There are issues around AI, and there are also the personnel. You also have to modernize the farmers themselves. Let them just move simple implements, motorized, so that, because these days when you still see footage of planters using their bare hands to take the seed and they put it inside it and they use their own hands to cover it. You know that, I mean, this is just like you see in the agricultural science practice farm that we had in the 1960s and in the 1970s. And of course, Juma, I was talking about a steer motor plant. He was supposed to have done that in Bauchi, years ago, and then all of a sudden, but those are long stories. Honorable Minister, let's return to you. I'm sure you've had the benefit of listening to the other guests on what they have said. So, in terms of vaccine production and the issues around it, out of the summit, did we get a sense, for instance, of whether there might be funding available for vaccine research from these other areas, apart from just producing, because vaccine research is critical in that. That's one. Secondly, I don't know what presence India had at the summit, because around about the time of the summit, there was also a story that India had destroyed hundreds of millions of COVID-19 vaccines because they had expired. And India, of course, has the largest vaccine manufacturing plant in the world. So, in terms of the summit, did we get a sense of funding for vaccine research and what role India might be willing to play in all of this, in supporting particularly the African producers?
Well, we work with the Serum Institute of India, which you mentioned just now is the largest vaccine producer in the world for technology transfer. Now, the mRNA vaccine technology is to address emerging pathogens and perhaps the neglected ones which we have not followed up here in Africa for some time. Now, research itself means funding. You need funding. It is not always guaranteed that there will be success out of it. Out of the many hundreds of attempts to develop vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines, majority didn't lead anywhere. But right now, the focus is not on the COVID vaccine itself, because there is a lot of production going on globally already in many countries, and vaccines are now being donated virtually free of charge. So the question is, how do you use that technology for other pathogens? How do you develop vaccines of other types? So that goes with research and development, and then involving the industry in now taking over the discovery and producing relevant vaccines to solve existing problems.
Indeed. Can you please tell us what types of vaccines are we looking at producing with all the support we'll get from what has been discussed at the summit in South Korea?
Well, first of all, it is the routine vaccines which we are working on right now. The vaccines, because support Nigeria gets from Gavi to have vaccines for our country, will be running out by about 2028. So by that time, we should be largely self-sufficient, because we're looking at self-sufficiency, and to go away from being receiving donations and eventually become
self-sufficient.
Yes, you don't want to be completely dependent on others for everything you want. So to be able to produce most of your own needs, and in doing that, Nigeria always looks at neighbors, because a lot of neighboring countries come to Nigeria for their own needs. So you have to add a little bit of that in your considerations and in your planning. But again, the new technology is what we are talking about. That the summit had a main subject of the new technology, mRNA technology, and how to use it to sort out new problems and older African problems.
Honorable Minister, thank you very much. Dr. Omale, very quickly, before we wrap up, I've been listening to Anis Rabiu's doctorals today. You see clearly the issues around town and gown linkage and the academia being available to solve societal problems. If I say societal problems, I don't necessarily mean social issues. It could be industrial issues, it could be economic issues, it could be agricultural issues. And I think that there are lessons inherent in what is said. Not that we didn't always know, but how can we achieve the break-in?
Well, the Honorable Minister is here. Even we have a lot of research institutes. I know we have the Nigerian Institute of Pharmaceutical Research, we have the National Biotechnology Research Institute. We have a lot of institutions that are conducting researches. The problem we have is that what are the results of this research? How have we been able to utilize these researches? In the university system, year in, year out, students conduct all kinds of projects which ends up either in the shelf, in the libraries, and nobody is utilizing the result of this research. So we have to, our education has to be research driven. Our education has to be, and that is why even at Base University we do practical research, things that will bring solution to the problems that society is encountering. And until we begin to utilize the product of this research, we will not be able to solve the problems that confront us. Like the flooding recently, we want to see how can we avert such situations in the future. What are the type of drainages that we have to put in place? Our own peculiar needs, maybe in local. Do you know that you can just put a dam somewhere now, and most of this water that stray into residential houses will just disappear? Or you can create some tunnel where this water will drain, or you can just dredge the River Niger and River Benue, and that dredging alone could solve this problem of flooding. So these researches have to be undertaken by not just research institutes, by students, by other researchers, consultants, and so on. So we must put a lot of attention to these things. Look at traditional medicine, for example, where people, a lot of people go into their own individual research and say that they have medicine for malaria or for one sickness or the other. How have we been harness this traditional medicine to solve the health challenges that when I came in, I heard you talking about having indigenous technology to solve health challenges, or that we developed our homegrown vaccine for COVID-19, and maybe it did not meet the light of day.
Yes, which is what which I think the conversation was centered on around in South Korea. We're running out of time. Actually, let's join Bashir Jamo on our Zoom network as the program begins to wind down. Talking about research briefly, I'm sure Nimasa is looking at way to research on finding solutions to a growing trend in the blue economy, which other countries have already invested in and are making lots of money from it. How can your research department bring to the fore issues that can be looked into and find ways to find solutions to bring more money into this country that can sort of lift up our economy, and we can be at par with any other country in the world that has maritime, authority working the way it should work and earn more money for the country? What do you think?
Well, thank you very much, Jumai. Already I made mention that we're conducting research on the needs of our coastal fleets as well as inland waterways. We have gone far on that. Part of the request made by the South Korean companies was we should provide them with the outcome of such research, because that will form the basis of the technology they will have to transfer from South Korea to Nigeria. Already on the issue of the blue economy, we have already conducted the research of facts and figures that we have in terms of the resources we have to harness, and to ensure that we make very good use of such resources in order to move the blue economy forward. Kenya was one of the African countries that conducted the first ever conference on blue economy in 2018 in conjunction with Japan. And since then, most countries in Africa continue to conduct different researches on what they have available in their own coastal waters, territorial waters. Recently, we had a conference in Abuja with international seabed authorities. so that where our own resources extends to the international seabed authorities, responsibility, we'll be able to harness, explore, and see how we can make use of such resources. And we discuss a number of issues. Part of it is technology. And in that conference, now we are going to make use of the outcomes of the conference to make sure that the Korean companies make a better use of the outcomes to ensure that we implement it to the letter and in the practical terms, so that at the end of the day, the whole essence of the research, as the doctor mentioned, is not going to be only or end in the shell, but also in the practical term, in terms of utilizations and in terms of implementations opposite. So we have a kind of monitoring team that will ensure that all findings of this research is being implemented to the letter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bashir Jamal, Director General of NIMASA, for being our guests on the program this morning. You joined us via Zoom. Also via Zoom with us this morning, Anis Rabiu. Anis Rabiu, of course, is a doctoral student of agricultural engineering. Joined us from Seoul in South Korea. Thank you very much for being our guest. In the studios, we have Dr. Adoyo Mala of the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy at Bayes University. Thank you for being our guest. Also, a deep appreciation to the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Osage Ehanere, who was himself in Seoul, South Korea during the President's visit. Honorable Minister, we appreciate you being around this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Good Morning Nigeria today, remember, we indicated that there is some positive development with respect to those who were kidnapped last Friday on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Take care of yourselves. Join us tomorrow same time, 7 in the morning. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
I am Jumai Yusuf.